Hi, today I am here to talk about child ADD, ADHD. On episode 10, I did adult ADD, and I did promise that I would do a full episode on just child ADD, ADHD because it does look a little bit different. I'm going to explain what child ADD, ADHD is, why it looks different, how it looks different, and what you can do if you are a parent and you suspect your child is, or if you already know that your child has been diagnosed. My name is Jennifer Spring, licensed marriage and family therapist in private practice in Southeastern Connecticut. And so here we go, child ADHD. If you haven't yet, please hit the subscribe so you can follow me and get notifications to other episodes that drop and go live, and also so you can help me reach my goal. Somebody did ask if I would talk about the board behind me each time. So this is my kitchen, and this is a chalkboard, chalk paint that I have on one little wall in my kitchen that I put a quote or a song lyric or a verse from the Bible or something. I try to mix it up every day if I can remember, or at least very frequently. So somebody asked if I would just read what was on the board every time I dropped. So here today is, it's not about how much you do, but how much love you put into what you do. That counts. And that is Mother Teresa. All right, so here we go. Child ADHD. This is a condition. According to the DSM-5, it is a disorder or a mental illness. But it is a condition that starts in children before 12. That is according to the DSM. Now, honestly, you should be seeing this in your child or your children immediately, 2, 3, 4 years old at the latest. They are already exhibiting signs and symptoms. The sooner you can identify any kind of medical condition in your children, the better off, so that you can immediately start implicating strategies and doing what you need to do so this child can thrive despite whatever condition that they have. It falls into two categories, inattention and or hyperactivity, impulsivity. And like I said, it can be both. But it is either one or the other. I wanted to quickly explain why this is different, why it looks different in children. And the reason is because our prefrontal lobe in our brain, which is responsible for reasoning and making good decisions, and doesn't fully develop until about the age of 25. So if you are an adult with ADD, or ADHD, your prefrontal lobe in your brain has already developed, which means you are more mature than a child would be in terms of doing a better job at making more rational decisions versus emotional decisions. Combined that with ADD, there's already an issue with making good decisions, right? So adult ADD looks different because you've probably adapted to your symptoms. You have fallen into a career, and I do talk about this in the episode for adult ADD, fallen into a career that best suits you, best suits your personality, and best suits your symptoms of ADD, ADHD. Chances are you are not an accountant, you are not sitting at your desk all day like you had to as a child in school all day. You are in a very active career that's very interactive. You're on the go, perhaps in the car, traveling, sales, entrepreneur, et cetera, et cetera. You've adapted things in your lifestyle, around the house, in your workplace, in your car, to suit some of the signs and symptoms of ADD, like disorganization and things like that. I'll get to more specific symptoms of child ADHD. But so you're coping differently as an adult. You've adapted. You've gotten through the hardest time in your life, which is school-aged, when you are forced to sit there for 8 hours a day, every single day, and need a lot of mental energy to get through your day, to focus and be attentive and to be quiet and sit still. So you're not as irritable, you're not as agitated probably, and like I said, you've adapted, so it looks very different. Kids with ADHD are more likely to show some acting out. You're not going to do that as an adult because you've formed your life to kind of fit your ADD. So like I said, it falls into two categories, and basically what ADD is, we once thought it was a chemical imbalance, but what we now know is that it's an issue. Certain regions of the brain are either like underactive or overactive, and basically what it comes down to is brain metabolism. So brain metabolism is about how much blood flow is going to those certain regions of the brain to produce the cells with enough energy, basically, either too much energy or too little energy, overactive region of the brain versus an underactive region of the brain. And so how we deal and what the treatment of all ADD is, child and adult, is to target the metabolism of your brain by certain strategies. And I'll get to that in the second part. Okay, so boys and girls can look a little different when it comes to child ADD, ADHD. Generally, and this is a generalization, I've seen this across, I've seen it this way and I've seen it not this way. And what I mean is boys tend to have the hyperactivity part and the impulsivity part more than girls. Not across the board. I've seen plenty of female children who were very impulsive. I have one girl that I'm thinking about who is so impulsive with her words, and I redid my hair over the fall, and I went from blonde to brown. And the first thing she did when she walked into my office was, "Oh my God, what did you do to your hair? It's brown." Okay, that's a very impulsive. She thought it, she said it with no filter. Somebody who doesn't have ADD might comment on the hair and might say it a little bit more tactfully. She was pretty critical in how she said it to me, which understandably so, because it was a major change and it didn't look that great, and she was right. But people that don't have ADD, ADHD are going to be a lot more tactful and pay attention to their surroundings and what they should say and when they should say it or when they should not say it. And I can think of another female client with ADHD child who is just so impulsive, she would be all over the room and hard to sit still. But generally, boys seem to be the ones that have the hyperactivity, impulsivity, whereas the girls tend to have the inattention part, more inattention than hyperactivity. Girls are generally, because they're not the ones misbehaving or tipping their chair in the classroom or shoving other boys or talking back, because they're quiet, they tend to be mislabeled as either shy, socially awkward, quiet, and they're unrecognized. And so these girls tend to go undiagnosed for a longer period of time. But again, this is general because I have seen boys that have no hyperactivity. They just really struggle with the inattention. But I'm doing a generalization here. So a lot of times parents bring their kids to me not because they know they're ADD, ADHD. They don't know. They just know there's something wrong. Sometimes their child is anxious or depressed, and that's really obvious. And it is very common that kids and adults with ADD, ADHD have comorbid diagnoses. They are often also maybe on the spectrum or anxious, depressed, or something else. Unfortunately, they do go hand in hand. And what happens here, and this is why it's so important to get your child diagnosed, and once I recognize that this child is diagnosed ADD, ADHD, I help the parents understand that the anxiety and the depression is secondary to the ADD. That is what's driving the depression and anxiety, because these kids struggle and they internalize their struggles. They look around a classroom all day long, every single day for 12 years of their life, more if they go to college, and compare themselves to other kids who can sit still and listen and get good grades and be organized, and they just can't. And they internalize it that something is wrong. They stress out because they're disorganized, they're not prepared, they're not doing as well as other kids on their tests or quizzes or homeworks or whatever. And so they're internalizing it and becoming anxious or depressed. So sometimes the parents that's what they're bringing to me as their primary presenting problem. And I obviously address that and then dig a little bit deeper. Now, my kiddos that are, present with the hyperactivity, impulsivity, I can tell in 5 minutes that, because I have a trained eye, that is what's primarily going on. And, I'll continue to do a full evaluation and assessment and go a couple of sessions to get some really good information gathering before I might propose to the parents that I want to evaluate the child, actually not for depression and anxiety, which they are presenting with, but instead to get to the root of the problem that might be ADD, ADHD. If we can address that and get that more under control, the depression and anxiety alleviates itself. Not always. Sometimes we have to treat both, but a lot of times the anxiety and depression alleviates itself. So that's important to understand, that you may not know as the parent that your child is struggling with this, and you bring them to therapy or to their doctor because you're not really sure. If you are sure that your child is ADHD, because you see in them what you may be experiencing in your life, because ADD, ADHD is genetic, it is very probable if you are a parent with it, your child may have it. They have your genes and your genetics. And so a lot of times it's very quickly and easily recognizable that your child is symptomatic, because they're doing all the same things that you did at that age, and a little bit of what you still do because you haven't worked through everything as an adult. So how do I assess you and evaluate you? And yes, I can do it. A good trained therapist with a lot of experience should also be able to do it. Some maybe therapists aren't comfortable doing this and will refer you out. If there's a lot going on, major, more than just the ADD, ADHD, a therapist may direct you to a neuropsychiatric eval. So this is you're gonna see a neuropsychiatrist or a neuropsychologist to do a very thorough. So sometimes if I suspect somebody is also on the spectrum, I'm not real good at identifying that and assessing that. I want a better evaluation than what I can do. So I will refer a kiddo for a neuropsych eval. And basically what that is a very, very extensive evaluation where it's going to be about 5 or 6 hours. Oftentimes, because of what's going on with the child, that is broken down into several sessions so that a child isn't sitting there for 6 hours. Sometimes, though, the doc will do one full day of testing and it's broken. There's breaks, there's food given, and it's not just, evaluations for 6 straight hours. But this is a really comprehensive evaluation that you may want to consider, because with it comes a very wonderful report with tons of several pages of recommendations for the school, for 504 plan possibly, for any kind of modifications that need to be done in the classroom, in the school, taken to college, whatever and wherever. But my evaluation is going to be, probably a couple sessions long. I have a Copeland symptom checklist that I do. I have the Vanderbilt assessment, and then I have another one that I didn't bring home with me to do this episode, but it's also another very thorough. I'm asking a lot of questions to the child for a self-report. I'm giving the parents, both parents or guardians, as many as possible, a couple evaluations to fill out so that I can see what they're reporting versus what the child is reporting. And I'm giving a handout for all the teachers that are involved in this child's life, preferably even going back to the year before and asking those teachers for the grade prior to also fill out the evaluation and the symptom checklist. I also ask for report cards. That's really important. Times have changed, and unfortunately, a lot of families aren't given a paper report card anymore. It's all online, so it's a little bit harder to collect, especially my high schoolers, because they don't even get a report card. It's on PowerSchool or whatever system that they have. And so they don't even sometimes know what they got on the report card because, they never got a notification or a letter sent home stating that it was posted. But in the report cards, I like to look at, yes, the grades, because they are very indicative of what's going on with the child and where the child may or may not be struggling, but in particular, the comments that the teacher writes. There are some very frequent common comments like, talks too much or doesn't live up to potential. I want to look for what the comments have to say by the teachers, because generally they are consistent year after year after year. And when I say report cards, I want them all. I mean, back to the day when I've been doing this for over 25 years, we used to get, paper report cards. I would get a stack of report cards if I was dealing with a high schooler back to first grade. And I'm looking through all of them very carefully and, highlighting to the parent the common theme here and how this actually correlates with everything they're seeing and what I'm seeing in the paperwork and the evaluation that I'm doing. So it falls into two categories, like I said, inattention and hyperactivity, impulsivity. So in particular, for inattention, the things that I'm looking for in assessing are how you do in the classroom in terms of, are you easily distracted? Can you sustain your attention to things? Are you able to focus on what you're reading, on what you're writing? Are you having to read and reread because you're losing your place or you're losing your attention span, and so you have to reread things? Are you writing and having to erase because you're skipping words or skipping letters or putting too many words, and so the cat ran after the dog, but you're repeating yourself. That's an issue because your brain is working so far in advance. You're not paying close particular attention to what is right in front of you. You're very easily distracted. You're daydreaming. You're spacing out. You have a very short attention span, especially to the things and the subjects that you don't particularly like. If it's a subject, we talk about the inability to focus when it comes to ADD. However, there is a component to hyper-focusing, which means a very strong ability to focus, but only on the things that the child likes. So it might be a video game, for instance, or it might be math. And so that child is so super focusing, hyper focusing is what we call it, on that video game or the math. But we do still consider that to be not focusing, because they're not focusing on everything else that's going around them. Like mom saying, hey buddy, it's time to get off the game. Like the cat, meowing for food, the dog barking to go out, the drink that you just spilled that you don't even realize you spilled. You're not focusing on everything else, but you're hyper focused on the one thing that you are focusing on. That's still symptomatic. Let's see. Inattention also is about being really enthusiastic about things in the beginning, and then like the focus and the attention and the desire, the interest kind of falls off. So they might start really well on a project or on a task perhaps, but then it just kind of falls off because they become easily distracted by something else that they can't sustain their focus on what they're supposed to be focusing on, so tasks don't get done. Procrastination is a huge one. I ask questions about how they do their work. Do they rush through assignments? Do they make careless mistakes? Do they even read the directions? A lot of time they don't. They just are not focusing, right? They're not attentive. They're just going right to problem number one, and sometimes doing assignments completely wrong, taking tests that with the wrong direction, so they get zeros or F's on assignments because they're not being careful, they're being careless. Underachieves is often a comment that I hear from parents and teachers when it comes to a child with the inattentive aspect of ADD, ADHD. So those are some of the questions I'm going to be looking for and some of the behaviors that I'm going to need to see to know that this is what we're dealing with. In my office, it's obvious to me, you know, they're maybe on their phones, and especially my older kiddos, and, you know, and not necessarily paying close attention to me. They're obviously, I encourage them to get off their phones because that's not conducive, but they're distracted by the voices in the hallway or in the waiting room, or the rain at the window, or they're just not, they ask me to repeat the question a lot, or they look blank. They look like they don't even know, they're not even here with me. And so I have to repeat things and explain and over-explain and over-explain. When it comes to impulsivity, this is really easy for a trained eye to see, and perhaps easy for you as a parent to see at home. The impulsivity part are your brain, the brain metabolism is overactive, and so your behavior is overactive. You are easily excitable, you are loud, you are yelling a lot, you are making impulsive decisions, like doing things and saying things without thinking. You're lying because you're not even thinking about your answer. You're just saying whatever you think that person wants to hear or whatever comes to mind. A lot of times I encourage parents to ask a question and say, buddy, I'm going to ask you a question, but I want you to wait 2 minutes before you give me the answer, so that they're forced to kind of actually think and not make an impulsive decision with their answer, but make a thoughtful one. These are the kids that are running and climbing and jumping and running, you know, cutting the line and hitting other kids, and not necessarily aggressive or violent because they're angry. You can have impulsive, angry episodes for sure. But the kids that are they're so handsy, and they're just have so much energy that they can't contain themselves. They could also not be pushing necessarily, but they might be hugging and touching other people. And so now this becomes an issue with friends. And remember I talked about earlier how sometimes you have secondary problems or issues related to the primary issue of ADD, ADHD. Social connectiveness can become an issue because kids with the impulsivity part of this ADD or ADHD can be irritating and annoying to other children. And so kids don't necessarily always want to be with them or play with them or invite them or consider them in the group or whatever, because they don't sit still. They are annoying. They might get in trouble a lot, and other kids might not want to be associated with them. These kids are disorganized. Their binder is disorganized, their backpack, their room, their everything. They lose things. They can't find things, and simple things like what they should have every day, like a pencil. These are the kids in the classroom constantly bumming things off of other kids because they forgot their lunch. They forgot everything sometimes, or they're losing stuff. They lose assignments, and they lose just what they need daily. It's hard to understand how this can happen, but it very easily happens. These kids have a hard time staying on task. They have a hard time, transitioning from one thing to the other. This is huge, and parents often get super frustrated. So in the school, this might look like hard time going from recess to the next, to back to the classroom where you have to focus, especially if it's a hard class right after lunch or right after recess. The transition time is very difficult. It could be transitioning from like summer break, the end of summer break, to the first month of school. Sometimes always, that's really, really difficult. And we have to do prep work like August 1st to get ready for that September 1st back to school date, in terms of getting back in the groove of sleep schedules and just, organization and things like that. It could be about transitioning from the video games to like getting ready to leave. They have a hard time putting the game down to do the next thing. And so the parent is constantly having to nag and nag and nag and then yell and yell and yell. It could be transitioning from waking up in the morning to getting out of the house to get to school. Mornings generally are the hardest time of the day. And I hear this a lot, and parents are frustrated and everybody's yelling in the morning, and it starts the day off super, just discouraging and kind of depressing. These are the kids that need constant supervision. They're difficult in a group situation. They have a hard time working in a group situation. That's also a whole clump of questions that I ask about working in a group. These are the kids that are cheating on games and not waiting their turn and speaking out of turn and just not thinking before they act. So like I said, there will be a thorough evaluation with numerous questions like these to get a good idea, and it's got to be consistent across the board. This can't just happen in school, but at home they're marvelous and perfect, or vice versa. This has to be happening across the board, at home, at school, in their sport. I'm somebody that coached a decade or more in soccer, and I remember my 5-year-olds and 6-year-old kiddos when I first started coaching. I knew who all the ADD kids were because they were the kids that I was picking off the ground because they were picking dandelions or watching the planes go by, and I had to pick them up and encourage them to get focused on what we were doing and get involved and pay attention. And I love those kids, but like I said, very obvious to me. So across the board, in school, at home, in their sport, in their daycare, with the babysitter, with Grammy and Poppy, with everywhere and everything. Okay, so what do we do? So after you have an evaluation you get diagnosed, you have options. Stimulants are generally the treatment of choice. Now, what a stimulant is we're increasing dopamine, and dopamine is a neurotransmitter, and this is increasing the brain metabolism, right? Which is giving them more energy or less energy so that part of the brain, which is overstimulated or understimulated, is metabolizing properly. Okay, so that's why stimulants work so well with an ADD, ADHD kiddo. Now, if you do not have ADD, ADHD, and you're given a stimulant, it will stimulate you. It will wire you. You will be high. You will be go, 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 go. You will have tons and tons of energy. However, in a brain with ADHD, ADD, the stimulant actually calms the brain down, quiets the brain to be able to focus and be attentive and stay on course, finish what you start, be less handsy, be less out of control with your body and your movement and your thoughts in your brain. Generally, that's the first and only course of treatment when it comes to a lot of doctors. And I do recommend that as an option because it does work really, really well. However, I talk about this in all my episodes about every issue because, as you know, if you've been watching me for a while, I'm very holistic in how I treat and how I go about treating my patients and how all the research that I follow when it comes to overall health, mental health and physical health, that it's not just about treating the problem, it's treating the whole system, which means your body and your brain overall. And I'm going to sound like a broken record, so sorry, not sorry, but you can improve your brain metabolism if you improve your brain metabolism, because again, ADD, ADHD is an issue with brain metabolism, okay? So if you can improve brain metabolism, you can then improve brain function and mental wellness. So this goes for everything and everything, not just ADD, ADHD, anxiety, depression, anything. If you improve your brain metabolism, you are going to treat whatever issue you are dealing with significantly. You may not cure it 100%, but you are significantly going to lower and decrease your symptoms. And what I mean by improving your brain metabolism is dealing with your nutrition, getting more exercise, adequate sleep, and getting off all substances. All right, so I'm going to go through those very quickly because I talk about them in other episodes. And so you can refer to those. But when it comes to health, physical health, mental health are all connected, okay? To be your best self, physically and mentally and physically, I want you to have good nutrition. I want you to not eat boxed and canned and bagged food. I want you to eat whole, real food. I want you to get the vitamins and the minerals and all the nutrients that your brain needs. I want you to supplement. I have a whole episode on supplementation. I recommend this to my kiddos with ADD and my adults and my elderly, because it's never too late to change brain metabolism and to get healthier physically and mentally. I want you to be supplement. I want you to lower the amount of processed foods you're eating, lower the amount of sugar, lower the amount of caffeine. I want you to, if you're an adult, lower the amount of alcohol you're consuming. I want you to know what food sensitivities you have, because if you are highly sensitive to gluten or dairy or anything else for that matter, you are going to have inflammation. Your brain is not going to be perfectly metabolizing. And so if you're eating those foods day after day after day, month, week after month, after year after year after year, your body and your brain is not working 100% effectively, and it will cause symptoms of some sort. And it is possible it is causing the symptoms of ADD, ADHD. You need to know what you can eat and what your body can metabolize and what your body can handle and what it's sensitive to and what it is not sensitive to. If you have a food sensitivity issue, you should not eat those foods. Now, this is really tricky with a lot of kids with ADD, ADHD, because they are very picky with their food. So they want only certain things and they eat 3 foods a day every single day. And we wonder why they're so symptomatic. So there's going to be work to be done with me, with your doctor, with the whole team, of getting off of bagged and boxed food and getting on whole food, understanding what the food tolerances or intolerances are, and improving nutrition. Exercise, so important for everybody of all ages. I have heard, I don't have ADD or ADHD, but I know some of my adults have told me in the past that if they do a really hardcore cardio or weightlifting exercise workout, they are good for like an hour and a half to 2 hours. Exactly the same amount of good that they would be after they took their Adderall or their Ritalin. The brain has changed metabolism. There is more blood flow going to the parts of the brain that it needs to go to, and they are able to focus and be attentive and be calm and get a lot of work done and be productive. Exercise is so important. Obviously, you're not going to be exercising all day long to get that brain boost, but frequent, adequate amount of exercise to get your kids involved in some sport that they're willing to do, that they can handle, to get them moving, to get them walking, to get them running around, lifting weights, doing something when it comes to exercise is hugely important and hugely effective for brain health. Adequate sleep, I see this all the time with a lot of my kiddos with ADD, ADHD, especially my high school ones or my college kiddos, because they procrastinate, because they waste time all day doing other things that are way more stimulating than their homework. They wait until 10 o'clock at night to start it, and so they're up until 2 o'clock in the morning, and then they're up at 6 a.m. to get ready for school. They are sleep deprived. When your brain is sleep deprived, it is not going to work properly. It is not going to function. It's not going to have good brain metabolism, and you are going to be symptomatic, perhaps with more than symptoms of ADD, ADHD. This is where the anxiety or the depression is going to kick in here. So getting on a really good sleep routine, I do need to do an episode. I promised one on what a good sleep habit and good sleep routine could be or could look like. Refer to my episode on visualization and guided imagery. That is a strategy that you can teach your kiddos, or you as an adult can possibly adapt as a way of calming the brain down to be able to relax the body and the brain enough to drift off into sleep. But if you are a parent, to really encourage really adequate sleep, getting rid of those phones earlier in the night, getting them off of screen time, off of games, having a really good nighttime routine of moving towards being busy to getting slower and slower and calmer and calmer and calmer to get into your bed to be able to fall asleep at night. Really important that you parents do that. And then getting off of substances. This is more so for my adults with ADD, but the alcohol, my teenagers with ADD, ADHD, my college kiddos or high school that think weed is the solution to all problems. Yes, it is now legal in many places, but it is not good for brain metabolism. It's not helping your cause. Vaping, nicotine, smoking cigarettes, all bad, 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 bad for brain metabolism. You've got to get off of substances. So let me say this again, because this is hugely, hugely important and not something that a lot of doctors or therapists are going to talk to you about, which is maddening to me, because this in itself is going to change brain metabolism, which is going to lower symptoms, which is going to improve mental wellness, which means you are going to be feeling better physically and mentally. Better nutrition. Let's move from terrible nutrition to poor nutrition to better nutrition to really good nutrition. I will guarantee that in itself is going to make you feel a lot better. Combine that with exercise, adequate sleep, getting off of all substances, you and your child are going to feel a million times better. You may not need your stimulant if that's the case. You may still need the stimulant at times. However, you don't know how good you can feel until you improve your brain metabolism with nutrition, exercise, and sleep, and getting off substances. If you're still not feeling as good as you want to be, or if your attention is not where you want it to be, or if your impulsivity or your hyperactivity is still not as low as you want it to be, then at that point you can make a very good, conscious, educated decision to still take your supplement. I mean, your stimulants. But it drives me nuts that people just want to go right to the easiest thing, which is the stimulants. And unfortunately they do work. But if you really want to take control over your health and your life, you're going to do the other things about nutrition, exercise, sleep, and getting off the substances to actually change your brain metabolism. That's it. That's everything. I hope you found this very helpful. Please refer to my other episode on adult ADD. I do talk about some other things when it comes to you adults. Like I said before, if you haven't yet hit the subscribe button, please do that. And I appreciate you tuning in. Thanks.